Hey BookTube, it's Samantha and I'm here doing a July wrap-up and then also giving you a little update about what I've been doing for the month of August. So really excited about all of this. I have read 5 books in the month of July and I actually DNF'd a book. So let me just kind of briefly go over those. The first book that I read, I have also talked about in a previous video. I'll leave a link up above so that you can watch that. But it was A Murder is Announced by Agatha Christie. This book is about a murder that is announced in the newspaper for the local community, and everyone is curious as to what is the murder. Is it already happened? Are they going to witness it? Are they going to try and solve it? When the murder happens, things go on from there. It was okay. I felt like once it got to the mystery, it was great. I was really enjoying the reading, but the whole build up to it was pretty annoying. And as I mentioned in the previous video, it did seem very dated to me. So that was a little bit of a turnoff for me. I gave it 3 stars. So it was okay. I do want to try a more contemporary, more recent release of Agatha Christie and see how that holds up. I know she's a very well-loved mystery author, so I want to try some other books from her before I make a final judgment of my thoughts on her. The second book that I read was one that I read for Rebecca's Bookopoly-a-thon, and it was Decider by Dick Francis. This is a book about a guy who is on a bus with his kids coming to see a race course just to kind of give the wife a little break. That's kind of its own little side story. While he's there, he hears about this big shareholder meeting with the family that basically owns the race course, and they're all arguing about what they want to do with the race course. He just so happens to be one of the few people who also owns shares of the race course. He decides to show up to kind of see how things are going to play out and to see what his role is going to be with all of this. This was actually a really fun read for me. I don't know if I necessarily breezed through it, but I did find myself enjoying the reading. It had almost a fiction life drama kind of feel to it, but it had this overarching mystery of like what exactly is going on, who did this and this and this event. If you looked at my Becca's Bookopoly video, I had mentioned that I wasn't sure if the ending was a trigger warning or not, and I was kind of debating about it, but I did a lot of thinking about it, and I don't think it is enough information in there that is sensitive that would be triggering. So I'm not going to say anything about it, but it was maybe like a half page at the very, very end of the book. Overall, I enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars. But if you want more info about the book and the writer, go check out my video. The third book that I read for the month of July was Calvin's War by James S.A. Corey. This is book 2 of the Expanse series, and I'm really surprised, but I read all of this in 2 days. 2 days. I did almost nothing when reading this book. I was so sucked into the plot, and there's just the right amount of balance of previous characters that we were already introduced in the first book, which was Leviathan Wakes, and also the right balance of new characters being introduced into this. I love all the characters. I love how they each have their own little personality and all their quirks. I feel like I know them very well. I really enjoyed following the mystery of what is going on that picked up from the first one. There is definitely a balance between a political strategy in a sense and the action in the story, as well as the character development sprinkled throughout. Really enjoyed that. One of the characters seemed to be kind of questioning his morals and his whole identity, which I thought was really well done in this. Overall, I gave this 5 stars. Absolutely loved the ending of this. The very last sentence just makes me want to go out and buy the 3rd book and start reading it like immediately. Very, very excited to continue with this series. The next book was one that I had planned to read for Becca's Bookopoly-a-thon, but because I had read the entire book of Caliban's War, I did not have time to finish this one. But that was Hammered by Kevin O'Hearn. I did finish this maybe a few days afterwards. This is book 3 of the Iron Druid Chronicles. I can't really talk about the plot of this book without major spoilers because it immediately picks up where the second book left off. So in the first book, which is Hounded, we are following Atticus O'Sullivan, who is just kind of this regular guy living in Arizona who owns a bookshop slash tea shop. He is also a druid, and he's been alive for thousands of years. So he's super old, and one of the gods decides to come after him because he has a special sword that the god thinks belongs to him. So it's a lot of action in this book and a lot of tongue-in-cheek. It's definitely a light, fun read. In this book, I particularly love OBrien, who is his hound dog companion, or wolfhound, I believe is the correct term. Just absolutely delightful. I love everyone in here. Not everyone is exactly lovable, but you love them for who they are. This book seemed to go a little bit slower for me at the very end. There's always like a big action scene at the end of the book, and while that was here as well, Kevin did a very huge section of the book developing some new characters that we meet, and I really enjoyed those sections. But it was almost like that was kind of the highlight of the book, which is really weird because it's definitely building up to the action, but for some reason it didn't have the same feeling for me as the first two did. So I gave this one 4 stars, but definitely going to be continuing the series. This is one of the series that has always helped me out of a reading slump every single time. And the last book that I read for the month of July was The Town That Feared Dusk by Calvin Demmer. This is actually a short. This is actually a short story that I read on my Kindle. It was like 99 cents or something. This book was following a journalist who is trying to find her big story, and she comes across the story that her previous coworker was working on, who had recently passed away, about this bridge that a lot of people have completed suicide at. She decides to give it a shot, to look at it, and the story goes from there. It's only 30 pages long, so I really can't talk about much more without spoiling it. I thought it was a nice little fun read. I could see myself having read this when I was in high school, maybe even middle school, when I was in those goosebump ages. It was a really good introductory into horror. It was a fun little read. Definitely not anything that's going to give me nightmares at the end of the night, but I found it was really enjoyable. I overall gave this 3 stars. So those are the 5 books that I read in July, but there is one book that I DNF'd. And unfortunately, that one was No One Gets Out Alive by Adam Neville. It makes me sad that I DNF'd this because I had picked up a book back in Vlogtober to read. I believe it was called The Last Days by Adam Neville. And I remember reading the first few pages and I was totally sucked in. I wanted to keep reading. I was really engaged, but I was also severely burnt out. I was reading basically a book a day. At that time, I was unemployed at the time. I was reading on my phone, which is this tiny screen. My eyes were already hurting. It was the end of the month, so I didn't end up finishing it, but it's always been in the back of my mind that I want to read it. So when I saw another book of his on the shelf, I figured I'd give it a shot. This book is about a girl who, she's renting a room at this really kind of rundown house that is run by some really creepy landlords. She has almost no money to her name. She's trying to get away from her stepmother, who has always been really mean to her. but she really doesn't have anyone to support her. So she's trying to find a job, she's trying to find her place, and the landlord is giving her a hard time about trying to leave and won't really let her leave without her deposit. She keeps on hearing these voices at night. She thinks that there's someone either in her room or is hearing someone like in the walls, but she's not entirely sure. That is the first 200 pages of the book. Just that. Just what I just said. Because it's over and over and over and over and over again. She wants to leave. Landlord won't let her. She hears voices. Wake up the next morning. She wants to leave. Landlord won't let her. Repeat. It's a 600-page book, people. I got through a third of the book. A third of the book. I actually got past more than a third of the book. I think I read almost half. It's so slow. And about the 200-page mark, I think maybe 250, I decided to look at some reviews on Goodreads, like, should I actually keep reading this book? Is it worth my time? And I saw a few reviews saying after the 250-page mark, that's when things really speed up and start going, and it's really good. Okay, I'll give it a try. I'm at 200. I can get to 250. I can do it. And I did it. But then it got really uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. For those who don't know, I'm a survivor of sexual assault, and there was a scene around the 250, 260 page mark where I became very, very worried that I was about to read either a rape scene or a sexual assault scene. It didn't happen, but those were the feelings that were coming up for me, that I was very hesitant about continuing to read, because I did not want to be reading something that was going to be describing a rape scene. I read probably another 40 or 50 pages, and while things definitely did kick up from that point, things were definitely on a more kind of aggressive tone. Aggressive in that it was horror, so like there's just constantly events bubbling up, multiple things happening compared to the first 200 pages. But I found myself just not caring what was going to happen. I was going into the book expecting a purely supernatural ghost haunted house story, and instead what I got was this girl kind of hears voices in the walls, but it's mainly about her horror of not being able to leave this house. And the book goes into that. I feel like going into it more might be spoiling it for anyone who might want to read it, because it's definitely more of a realistic horror that women who are in a very vulnerable position, if you enjoy those kinds of horror stories, this book probably is for you, because she's in a very vulnerable state and things just never start looking better for her. At the very beginning, the main character is she's very dependent on others. She's very kind of whiny. She was not a pleasant person to read, but I heard that as the book goes on, she gets smarter and wiser and better, and I was starting to see the progression of that. So I believe that does happen in the story. I just didn't finish it. So for those of you who want something that's kind of a more realistic horror, this might be up your alley. For me, it was not up my alley. If you have any sort of like sexual trauma, I don't necessarily recommend to read this book either, because I've been on my recovery path for 10 plus years, and it was really kind of hitting home for me. So I would probably be wary of that if that also applies to you. So next, let me tell you about my August plans. I've already gotten started on this. I don't know what I was thinking, but that's okay. For the month of August, first of all, I wanted to finish the books that I had on hand that I really wanted to read. One of them was Mexican Gothic by Sofia Moreno Garcia. I'll talk about this later, but let's just say I very highly enjoyed it. So I did finish this book in the month of August. And then a book that I had been holding on from the library for a while and was really wanting to get to was Random Harvest by James Hilton. As you can see, I am probably 3/4 of the way through, 2/3, probably closer to 2/3 of the way through. So I'm wanting to finish this book this week for sure, because it's due on Friday. But overall, and this is probably definitely going to go into the beginning of September, I want to try and read the entirety of the Man Booker long list. Yeah. The long list, as I've been kind of growing to understand, is generally just fiction. It's not fantasy, it's not horror, it's fiction. It's like general, just regular life, which are normally books that I don't read. But I figured if I'm going to try and read other genres like general literature, that maybe the Man Booker Prize is a good place to start. You know, they're highly rated for a reason, right? First of all, I have actually already got my hands on and read How Much of These Hills is Gold by Xifan Zhang. I'll talk about this in a different video, but again, enjoyed this one. I was also able to get my hands on Redhead by the Side of the Road by Ann Tyler. This one I actually didn't finish. I started it and found, again, I just wasn't interested in the main characters. It was definitely very well written, and I could see why a lot of people would actually really enjoy this. So this is definitely not saying this isn't a good book. It just wasn't for me. And I'll talk about that in another video as well, but I just kind of wanted to mention it here. The rest of the books, I have 4 of these right now. I have 4 of them right now. One that I've started already is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. I am really excited about this one because BookTube has been talking about it all over the place. And I'm also doubly excited because I think I'm the first one to read this book from my library. Like, I put a hold on this baby and it said that it was in transit, so it was like being purchased and coming to the library. So I think I'm actually the first one to read it. So that's also really exciting. If you don't know, this book is about a 20-year-old or so African-American girl who is babysitting for this rich white family, their little 2-year-old, and they go to the grocery store to just kind of waste some time. And this big incident happens where a security guard kind of comes into play and just really embarrasses her and accuses her of kidnapping the child. You're also following the mother of the child, who is 25, and just kind of following their interaction with each other and how the events of this security guard bring us out into other issues that kind of help them bring them together. That's at least kind of the feel that I got for it. I got this amazing bookmark from A Stranger Dream, and I'll put her info and link down below. But I had to get Bride of Frankenstein because, I mean, right? But she has the most amazing, gorgeous horror bookmarks I've ever seen. Like, I just want to buy half of her store. So please go visit because it's amazing. So I'm reading that one. Definitely wanting to finish that soon. Next book is The Shadow King by Maza Mengiste. And this book, from what I understand, is held in World War II. We are following Hirut, who is a maid for an officer of the emperor, and the officer ends up running away or whatnot, and she jumps on the opportunity. She goes into disguise as the emperor and soon becomes his guard. So as a woman, she starts kind of making her own fight against the Italians. So it sounds really good. Like, this sounds up my alley, even if it wasn't on the Man Booker Prize list. So, or the long list, I should say. So I'm actually really excited to get to this one. The next book that I got was Appearagon by Colum McCann. And this book is about two individuals, Bassam, who is Palestinian, and Rami, who is Israeli. Obviously, there's tensions, there's fighting, a lot of suicide bombers, bombs, shootings, a lot of violence going on because of the war. They both have children, and both of their children are killed because of the war. I think it's two different ways. One of them is killed by a rubber bullet, and the other one is killed from a suicide bomber. So they find out about each other's stories, and they start working together to try and bring peace into the area. So this book sounds really good as well. This book, Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart, I think this is going to be a cry book. I can feel it. I can feel it. It is set in the 1980s in Scotland, and we're following a boy named Hugh, also goes by Shuggie. And he is kind of taking care of his mom named Agnes. She's doing her best to try and provide and trying to stay on the up and up, trying to make things look like they're okay, but she's actually also an alcoholic, and just kind of talking about their burdens and how they're trying to just find their way in life. While it's definitely a real life fiction kind of book, I think it's going to be really, really good. I'm just worried that I'm going to be crying a lot. But I'm sure it's going to be because it's good. One of the books that I also have is This Mournable Body by Tsitsi Degremba. This book, from what I understand, is a sequel. I think it's the third book in a series, but it's been reading like a standalone. I'm able to kind of follow what's going on with the story without reading the previous ones. It is following the main character who is living in like a boarding home situation, and she's trying to find a job. She's trying to get on top of things, and everything just keeps on nicking her down. She lives in Zimbabwe. Based on the way that the characters are talking with one another, it sounds like it's taking place soon after the events of the Rhodesian Bush War, which was from 1964 to 1979. So I'm assuming that this book takes place either in the 80s or the 90s. Again, I only have the audiobook, so I haven't been able to read the cover or anything like that. I did have to do a little bit of searching into exactly what war they were referencing, so that's why I knew that it was the Rhodesian Bush War. I'm definitely going to be doing some more research and educating myself on this, because I had no idea what this war was that they were mentioning. So I definitely want to research more about the war, what caused it, the different sides, so that way I can get the context of the book and really understand the impact that it has. So far, I have been enjoying it though, but I need to start finishing it soon. The other books that are on the list that I just have not been able to get my hands on are The New Wilderness by Diane Cook, Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi, Who They Was by Gabriel Krauss, Real Life by Brandon Taylor, and Love and Other Thought Experiments by Sophie Ward. Those books, I've been looking at the libraries, both the LA library, because that's the one they have on my phone, as well as my local library, and they just don't have them yet. So I'll keep looking. I don't know if I'll read them within the next month or so, but maybe by the end of the year I'll have them read. There is one book that I haven't mentioned that's on the list, and that is The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. I actually did pick up this book, but I never started it because I found out it was also the third book. It was of a trilogy, so it was the final book. And I did some research to see if I could possibly still read the third book without reading the previous two. The general consensus that I found was that, yeah, you can read the third book on your own, but you're missing a lot of the fun and enjoyability of the book if you haven't read book 1 and 2 first. So I've just been kind of debating with myself if I actually want to read the third one. It was a really chunky one too. I want to say it was either this size or even maybe a little bit bigger. So considering that I had these other books already, I figured, why don't I just start with the books that I know are standalone novels and then go from there. When I was also at the library, I don't know what came into me, but I also picked up A Blinding Knife by Brent Weeks, which is book 2 in the Lightbringer series. At the very beginning of the year, I stated that I wanted to try and finish the entire series. And it's August. And I've only read book 1. Which, I mean, it's still doable. It's still doable. But the end of the year is coming up sooner than I would like. So I should probably start getting through these books because they're big. So we'll see about that one, but my primary focus is on the Man Booker prize list books. And again, I'm not trying to force myself to read them through. If I'm not enjoying it, I'm just going to put it to the side. But I figured it would be a good branching out for me to try and read other genres. We'll see how that goes. I should have an update for you guys later on in the month. I can't imagine I'm going to have these books for very long, especially these two, as they are both 14-day loans. And this one I picked up first, so I really have to read this one. This one I picked up, I want to say like 2 days ago. So I've got a little time on this one, but these two books are kind of my priority because they have to go back sooner. That is my July wrap up and kind of my August summary of a TBR. But do keep an eye out for towards the end of this month because there are some big plans that I have for the month of September when it comes to reading. Let me know down below if there are any books that you're planning on reading for the Man Booker prize list as well, or if you're just going to wait until the short list comes out, or if it's not even on your radar. And also, if you've read any of the books that I had read for the month of July, feel free to let me know down below what you thought of those. Until next time, see ya.